You guys, I have officially beaten the main campaign of Skyrim and my new series is about to begin, but not today. Scripting takes time, and if I'm going to review something as big as Skyrim, I want to do it right. So today, I thought I would fulfill the other promise of this channel. Most of you probably don't know this because no one reads the About page, but for the 3 of you who have been waiting, the time has finally come. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day that we delve into the world of anime. And now that I've lost half my audience, I think now is a good time to give 2 disclaimers for this video. Number 1, spoiler alert for My Hero Academia up through season 6 of the anime. You've been warned, so I don't want to see any complaints in the comment section. Number 2, this video is specifically about the anime adaptation of the manga. I typically watch these shows with my wife, and in an attempt to not accidentally spoil something for her, I try not to read the manga for things we haven't yet seen together. I'm sure that will make some viewers angry, but I'd like to stay married, so you'll just have to get over it. And now that we're finally past housekeeping, what the heck is up with My Hero Academia? Before I get to my criticisms though, there are those who claim My Hero has always been trash because it's boring, has a predictable shallow story, and is filled with bad characters. There's also the criticism that the fan base is annoying, but I have absolutely no defense for this one. Of course, when it comes to the show being boring, that's a matter of opinion, so I can't fully disagree with that. And depending on how much manga reading or anime watching you've done in the past, it's possible you could find the main story beats predictable. After all, it is a shonen. But as for the story being shallow and the characters being bad, these criticisms are just wrong. Or at least they were. People claiming the story is shallow either 1, don't pay attention, or 2, don't understand the subtext and the themes being presented. While on the surface, My Hero looks like the story of a quirkless boy becoming the world's greatest hero, the true themes revolve around characters other than Deku. I don't have time to analyze every theme brought up in My Hero, but the one that stands out to me the most is the idea that some quirks effectively guarantee that their users will be relegated to the fringes of society. And the most obvious example is Tomura Shiguraki. His quirk is the ability to destroy anything he touches, including other people. With a quirk like this, it was only a matter of time before his powers would awaken and he would kill someone close to him, even if he hadn't had such an abusive upbringing. Had he first been approached by the police instead of All for One, how else could they have responded other than to immediately lock him up so that he couldn't accidentally hurt someone else? From the beginning, Tomura Shiguraki's quirk sets him up to be a hopeless character in this world. And the same is true for less murderous powers that result in odd personalities. What place is there in this society for someone like Himiko Toga, whose quirk means falling in love with someone makes her want to ingest their blood? And what about Spinner, who has no real powers but whose appearance makes others view him as a monster? When people are born undesirable through no fault of their own, how do you decide what to do with them? How do you regulate the use of meta abilities? Should quirks be used to improve work efficiency? How do you handle those who use their powers for evil? Do people become villains because of their quirk, or do they become villains because of how their quirk makes society treat them? To me, these are interesting themes, and especially through the My Villain Academia arc, these themes are on full display but not so heavy-handed as to be eye-roll inducing. There's a reason why so much time is dedicated to showing the villains together with no heroes around. I still remember the first time I watched Shiguraki's origin story. I was utterly speechless. I just sat there stunned, staring at the screen. And then I looked over at my wife and her expression was the exact same as mine. Anyone who says they watched that episode and felt nothing is either heartless or lying. Which plays into my opinion that the characters in My Hero are actually great. I am gonna qualify that statement though. When I initially tried to watch My Hero, I actually fell off on the first episode for one single reason. Deku is an extremely annoying protagonist at very least for the entire first season. First of all, if my goal was to become a superhero and I was born without a quirk, I wouldn't just be sitting back waiting for some miracle to come along. I would be training my body every single day so that even if I never developed a quirk, I could still help people. The fact that Deku was so out of shape but still hoping and believing that one day he would become a hero has always irritated me. And the fact that he also just ran in to help Bakugo when realistically he would have just been making everything worse in any situation that didn't include All Might standing nearby. It infuriated me. The nicest thing I can say is that Deku was an idiot. But the great thing about this show is that Deku isn't the only focused character. Aside from what I would call a questionable line at the beginning of the series,
just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof of the building.
This is not okay.
Bakugo to me is a likable character that plays his role well and only gets better with time. Tokoyami was also an immediate favorite for me. Gentle and LaBrava were a charming pair despite their short time on the show, and if you don't like Twice, I don't know what your problem is. All of this to say that I really like a lot about this show. And I think most of the criticisms people level at it are because on the surface, it comes across as just a typical shonen. So they dismiss it as anime hipsters do with most shonen anime. But more recently, there have been criticisms not from your typical My Hero haters, but from longtime fans that previously defended the show's quality. And if I'm honest, there's quite a bit that I agree with. While so far in this video I've argued for the well-made elements of My Hero, I do think it's fair to criticize elements of the story that feel rushed or clumsy, which seem to have occurred more frequently in this last arc. The example I want to focus on for this is the biggest offender to me personally, and that is the handling of Muriel's recovery. Mirio is one of my favorite characters in this show. If Deku is the Naruto of My Hero Academia, then Mirio is the Rock Lee. He was dealt a losing hand with a quirk that was effectively useless for hero work. Yes, he could become permeable, but he would lose all of his senses in the process. Imagine having to fight enemies while not being able to see or hear them. For someone with a weaker will, this would have been the same as having no quirk at all. But Mirio never got discouraged. Instead, he worked on himself, strengthening his body and his mind, and enduring constant failure, but always with a smile, much like another hero we could think of. Eventually, he caught the eye of Sir Mirai Sasaki. Anyway, eventually he caught the attention of Sir Night-Eye, who taught him to predict his enemy's movements. And this skill is what enabled him to become the dominating force that we see in his training with Class 1A and his battle with Overhaul. Between my wife and I, there's an ongoing debate as to whether Deku deserved to receive All Might's power. And my point is always that if Deku really wanted to become a hero, he wouldn't have just been fanboying over other heroes, he would also have been training his body like Muriel so that he could help people even if he didn't have a useful quirk. But I'm done bashing Deku for now. Back to Mirio. Once he was able to choose his hero persona, he went with the name Lemillion to represent that his goal was to save 1 million people. During the stakeout of the Shie Hasaikai, Mirio allowed Overhaul to walk away with Eri, not knowing the suffering she would endure as a result. This was his first great regret as a hero, and he staked his entire being on the promise that next time he would fix his mistake, that he would save her. So, when he initially lost his powers, it was an emotional moment because he was sacrificing himself for the sake of his identity as a hero. In his words, "How can I save 1 million people if I can't even save this one?" He didn't know what kind of bullet was in the gun. He couldn't make Eri permeable, and it's reasonable to think that he couldn't get there fast enough to carry her out of the way. So he did the only thing he could think of in that moment and took the bullet. There was buildup, there was uncertainty, and the entire situation felt organic. He did succeed, but at the cost of his future. If we're honest, we all knew that he would somehow get his powers back, so if you're anything like me, you figured out almost immediately that the only proper way for him to recover his powers and complete his arc would be for Eri to master her rewind ability and heal him. That way, his sacrifice and success in saving Eri would be the catalyst that led to his recovery. And while that's exactly what happens, the problem comes not from the outcome being predictable, but from how it's presented. Whereas the power lost was built up and did everything right to feel organic, his power being restored falls into the trap of placing shock value over proper buildup. What could have been a powerful moment in Mirio's character arc was reduced to a Deus Ex Machina with a bland flashback. The bigger issue here is that there's an unusual amount of telling instead of showing in this arc. We hear that Eri has been training her quirk, but we never really see what that means. So we have no context for how far along she is. We don't see her struggles or successes in using her quirk. We don't get to hear her inner monologue of her resolve to heal Mirio. We don't get to see her try and fail to heal him, or anything else that might have sown seeds of his return. As mentioned before, My Hero isn't really a show that excels at surprising the audience, because while it does explore interesting themes, it still tries to fit into the shonen mold. The show is at its best when it ignores shock value and focuses on the implications of what's happening. For example, if you're paying attention, it isn't really a shock that Bakugo rejects the villain's offer to join them. But what's interesting about the situation is what it reveals about Bakugo's values. And later, the weight that Bakugo carries as a result of him being captured and forcing All Might to exhaust the rest of his power leads to interesting consequences. Even the Dabi reveal could feel predictable if you're actively looking for twists in the plot. But what's more interesting about that reveal is the way it influences the Todoroki family relationships and the parallel it creates between Dabi and Shoto. My Hero Academia doesn't excel at flashy battles or unpredictable surprises. This isn't Attack on Titan, but instead it shines when presenting the consequences and payoffs of occurrences within the story. My concern with the previous season and the concern of many other MHA fans is that the series is forgetting its strengths and resorting to storytelling tactics that don't suit the format. This is concerning when you realize that the upcoming season is supposed to be leading toward the finale of the show because it provides reason to believe the final conclusion could also be rushed and that the resolutions will feel less organic than they should. When it comes to the anime, there are still significant gaps in where story arcs currently stand versus where they'll likely end up. For example, the previously mentioned Todoroki family dynamic, the public perception of heroes, and the remaining question of how you create a society that has room for undesirable quirks. Fans are right to be upset with the anime and manga when the setup and payoff that's been handled so well so far starts to fall off this close to the end. At this point though, I kinda feel like we're in too deep. With maybe 2 seasons to go for us anime-only viewers, all we can do now is hope that the ending doesn't completely fall apart and that Horikoshi can stick the landing. At least that's what I'm gonna do. But what about you? How are you feeling about the state of My Hero? So far, I've been able to avoid manga spoilers, so please be considerate of others in the comments below. Anyway, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you want more anime content, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.